On the morning of March 14th, 2024, two bodies with multiple stab wounds were found in the shower block C of the Oregon Women's Correctional Facility. But that would happen later. It all began on a cold February morning when a prison bus entered the grounds of the Salem Correctional Facility, carrying another batch of convicts. Natasha Kinnaird sat on the hard seat, handcuffed, staring out the dirty window at the gray concrete walls, barbed wire, and guard towers. She was 29 years old, and until that day, the scariest place in her life had been the courtroom where the judge had handed down her sentence. 4 years for financial fraud and forgery of official documents. 4 years. 1,460 days. The bus stopped at a massive gate. Natasha heard the clang of metal and the rough voices of the guards. The doors opened and a cold wind rushed inside. A woman in a prison guard's uniform ordered them to get off one by one. Natasha got up on her stiff legs and descended the steps. The asphalt under her feet seemed as hard as stone. She walked with the other prisoners through several checkpoints, metal detectors, and dimly lit corridors. The registration procedure took several hours. First, they took her fingerprints again, even though this had already been done at the detention center. Then they photographed her. Full face, profile. Natasha looked into the camera lens and saw in her reflection on the dark screen an unfamiliar woman with frightened eyes. They made her strip naked, examined her, and searched her with humiliating thoroughness. The guard checked every fold of her clothing and every seam with an indifferent expression. Natasha stood naked under the cold neon lights and felt sweat running down her back, despite the coolness of the room. She was given a prison uniform. Baggy gray pants, a gray shirt made of coarse fabric, and underwear that smelled of cheap powder. Natasha changed, and the last remnants of her former life disappeared. The accountant who wore strict suits and heels ceased to exist. Now she was prisoner number 8,352. The guard led her down a long corridor to Block C. The walls were painted a dirty yellow, the paint peeling in places. It smelled of bleach, sweat, and something sour. Voices, laughter, and screams came from behind the barred doors. Natasha walked and felt her heart pounding in her throat. Every sound made her flinch. Every glance from behind the bars seemed threatening. The guard stopped at one of the cells, opened the door, and nodded to Natasha. She crossed the threshold. The cell was small. 2 beds bolted to the wall, a metal table, a toilet without a partition, and a tiny window near the ceiling. A black woman in her 40s with short hair and a scar on her chin was sitting on the lower bunk. She looked at Natasha appraisingly, but without obvious hostility. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. The woman on the bunk was silent for a few seconds, studying the newcomer. Then she said in a low, hoarse voice, "Rita Allwood, I'll be your cellmate. The top bunk is yours. The mattress is crap, but you have no choice. Put your things away neatly. My territory is tidy, understand?" Natasha nodded, unable to find the words. Her voice was stuck somewhere deep inside. "Can you talk?" Rita raised an eyebrow. "Natasha," she managed to say. "Natasha Kinnaird." "Okay, Natasha. Listen carefully because I won't repeat myself. This isn't a resort. Only those who understand the rules survive here. Rule number 1, keep your mouth shut. Don't talk too much. Don't get involved in other people's business. Don't ask questions. Second, don't trust anyone. Not even me, understand? Third, find your place in the hierarchy and stick to it. Don't try to climb to the top, but don't sink to the bottom either, or you'll be eaten alive. Natasha placed her meager belongings on the top bunk and slowly sat down. Her legs were shaking. Rita continued talking, explaining how the prison world worked. There are several gangs here, you see. The strongest is Chanel Butler's. She's the queen of Block C, and no one dares to contradict her. Chanel is in for drugs and assault, and she has 12 years left, so she's in no hurry. She has her henchmen, mainly her lover, Tyra Rainbolt, and a couple of other thugs. They control almost everything. Who is friends with whom, who gets what, who owes whom. There's also Laverne Kinnaird group, but they're smaller and occupy Block D. There's a truce between them, but it's shaky. The rest stick to themselves or in small groups, like me. And you? Natasha cautiously looked up at Rita. Why are you alone? Rita smiled. Because it suits me. I don't get involved in anyone's business, and no one gets involved in mine. I'm serving my time quietly. 15 years for armed robbery, already served 8. 7 more to go, unless they give me early release. I know how things work here. That's how I survive. And you, baby, have to learn quickly if you don't want any trouble. Natasha nodded. It all sounded like a description of some terrible world where the laws of the jungle prevailed. She didn't know how to live in it. She didn't know how to defend herself. Until that day, her most frightening experience had been being scolded by her boss at work. What will happen if I break a rule? She asked quietly. Rita looked at her seriously. It depends on what rule and to whom. If it's a minor thing, they might just pressure you psychologically, declare a boycott. If it's more serious, they'll beat you up in a corner where the cameras can't see. If it's really serious... She didn't finish the sentence, but Natasha understood. The first hours in the cell dragged on painfully. Natasha lay on the top bunk, staring at the ceiling and trying to comprehend that this was reality. 4 years. 1,460 days. She thought about her apartment, her soft bed, the peace and quiet. She thought about the freedom she had so foolishly lost by forging documents for quick money. It had seemed like a good idea. No one would get hurt. No one would find out. But they did find out. And now she was here. At noon, Rita got up and said, It's lunchtime. Come on, I'll show you the dining room. And remember, don't look anyone in the eye for too long. Don't push. Don't cut in line. Take your portion and follow me. They left the cell along with a stream of other prisoners. The corridor was filled with voices and the sound of footsteps. Natasha walked next to Rita, trying not to fall behind. There were women of all ages around them, young, old, thin, and fat. But they all had the same look in their eyes, harsh and wary. No one here relaxed. Everyone here was ready to defend themselves. The dining hall turned out to be a large room with long rows of tables and benches. It smelled of boiled cabbage and something fried. Natasha stood in line for a tray and received her portion. Thin soup, a piece of gray bread, and something unidentifiable for the main course. She followed Rita to a table at the far end and sat down on the edge of the bench. And then she felt someone's gaze on her. Natasha looked up and saw a woman at the next table. She was staring straight at her, without looking away. She was a tall, strongly built black woman of about 35 with hair slicked back and a cold, appraising gaze. 3 other inmates were sitting next to her, but it was clear that this woman was the leader. She looked at Natasha the way you look at something you want to have. Natasha quickly looked away and buried her face in her plate. Her heart was beating faster. She could feel her cheeks flushing. Rita leaned over to her and whispered, That's Chanel Butler. She's looking at you. Chanel has her eye on you. That's bad, baby. Very bad. Natasha froze with her spoon halfway to her mouth. What does that mean? She asked, barely audibly. Rita shook her head. It means she's noticed you. Chanel loves pretty new girls. She'll try to get your attention, and when Chanel wants something, she gets it. Always. You know what I mean? Natasha understood. She felt nauseous. She pushed her plate away. I can't eat this. Eat, Rita said harshly. You need strength here. Hunger is your enemy. Eat everything they give you, even if it's crap. Natasha forced herself to finish the soup, though every spoonful was a struggle. All the while she could feel Chanel Butler's gaze on her back. When lunch was over, Rita quickly led her out of the dining room. In the evening, when they were back in their cell, Rita sat down next to Natasha on the lower bunk and spoke seriously. Listen to me carefully. Chanel is a problem, a big problem. She won't just take you by force, although that could happen. She will break you down gradually, psychologically. First, she'll offer protection, gifts, privileges. Then she'll start demanding gratitude. And then she'll say, you owe her. And then you won't have a choice. You'll become her property. But But there are guards here, supervisors, Natasha said, confused. Aren't they supposed to protect us? Rita smiled bitterly. Security? Baby, security doesn't care what happens between prisoners as long as it doesn't go beyond certain limits. There are rules here. The guard, Bridgewater, who is in charge of our block, knows everything that's going on. But she turns a blind eye because it's easier that way. As long as there's no open violence, as long as everything is quiet, she's happy. And Chanel knows how to act quietly. Natasha wrapped her arms around herself. She was cold, despite the stuffiness in the cell. What should I do? She asked in a trembling voice. Rita was silent for a long time, staring at the wall. Then she said slowly, There are several options. First, try to stay away from her. Don't let her see you. Become invisible. But that's difficult when she's already noticed you. Second, find protection from someone else, but then you'll owe that person, and that's not the best option either. Third, confront her directly. Show her that you're not easy prey. But that requires strength and courage, and you don't have that yet, baby. Fourth, Rita paused. The fourth option is to resign yourself and accept whatever happens. But I don't advise you to do that. Natasha felt tears welling up in her eyes. She fought them, not wanting to show weakness even here, in her cell, alone with Rita. But the tears still ran down her cheeks. She covered her face with her hands and cried quietly. Rita put her hand on her shoulder. Cry if you need to. No one can see you here. But remember, within these walls, tears are a luxury you can't show others. Tears here mean weakness, and the weak are broken quickly. Natasha cried for a long time, until there were no more tears left. Then she wiped her face with her sleeve and took a deep breath. Rita was right. Weakness is a death sentence in this place. You have to become stronger. You have to learn to survive. The night was filled with nightmares. Natasha woke up several times from every rustle, every sound behind the door. In the morning, she got up feeling broken, with a headache. Rita was already up, doing some exercises in the corner of the cell. Get used to the routine, she said. Everything here is on a schedule. Wake up, breakfast, work, lunch, walk, dinner, lights out. Break the rules and you'll earn yourself a stay in solitary confinement. You haven't been assigned to a job yet, but you will be soon. Newcomers are usually sent to the laundry or the kitchen. The following days were all the same. Natasha tried to be inconspicuous, but it didn't help. She felt Chanel Butler's gaze constantly, in the dining room, on walks, in the hallway. Sometimes Chanel would walk by and smile at her. Sometimes she would blow her a kiss. Sometimes she would just stare at her long and intently. And every such glance was a promise that something would happen between them soon. Natasha tried to stay close to Rita, but she understood that this was no protection. Rita couldn't be with her all the time, and Chanel was just waiting for the right moment. On the fourth day after her arrival, Natasha was assigned to work in the laundry room. It was hard, monotonous work, loading dirty laundry into huge machines, hanging up clean laundry, ironing uniforms. The laundry room was stuffy and smelled of steam and detergent. Natasha worked silently, trying not to attract attention. Other prisoners worked nearby, some talking and laughing. She kept to herself. But at the end of her shift, a young woman with a tattoo on her neck approached her. She stood very close and said quietly, Chanel said to tell you she wants to talk to you, after dinner. Don't you dare not come. Natasha froze. The woman left without waiting for an answer. So, the time had come. Chanel had decided to take action. Natasha did not go to the meeting after dinner that evening. She stayed in her cell, pretending to be ill. Rita said nothing, just shook her head. But both of them understood that this was only a delay. Chanel was not the type to forget or forgive being ignored. The next day was walking day. The prisoners of Block C went out into the courtyard in small groups. It was a fenced-in area with concrete flooring, a few benches, and a basketball hoop without a net. High walls with barbed wire, guard towers at the corners. An hour of free time in the fresh air was the only opportunity to see the sky. Natasha walked next to Rita, staying closer to the wall. Rita was silent, but tense. Natasha could tell by her tense shoulders and the way she kept looking back. They hadn't even made it halfway across the courtyard when 4 women blocked their path. Chanel Butler stood in the center, hands in her pockets, relaxed in the posture of someone who was completely in control of the situation. Next to her was Tyra Rainbolt, a large, muscular woman with a heavy gaze. 2 other henchwomen took up positions on either side, cutting off any escape routes. "Well, hello, new girl." Chanel smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "We agreed to meet yesterday, but you didn't show up. That's rude." Natasha remained silent, her fists clenched. Rita stepped back slightly. She couldn't help, and they both knew it. "You're probably scared here, aren't you?" Chanel continued, taking a step closer. "A new place, unfamiliar people, danger at every turn. I understand. It's easy to get hurt here if you don't have protection. And you don't." "I don't need protection," Natasha said quietly. Tyra snorted. Chanel tilted her head to one side, studying Natasha. "Oh, how interesting. You think you can handle it on your own? Sweetie, you won't last a week here without support. Someone will steal your things. Someone will set you up with the guards. Someone will just decide to teach you a lesson for your pretty face. I've seen it happen. Want me to tell you what happened to the last new girl who decided she didn't need anyone?" Natasha didn't answer. Chanel continued, lowering her voice. "But I can make sure no one touches you. I can give you everything you need to live a normal life here. Extra food, cigarettes if you smoke, nice things, respect, peace of mind. All you have to do is stay close to me. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Natasha understood perfectly well. She felt sick. "I don't want to be close to anyone," she said, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "I just want to serve my time and get out of here." Chanel sighed as if she were talking to a slow child. "Sweetheart, you don't understand. This isn't an offer. It's a given. Sooner or later you'll be mine. The only question is how it will happen. Easily or with difficulty. With or without your consent. I'm giving you the opportunity to choose your path. Not many people get that chance." Tyra placed her heavy hand on Natasha's shoulder. Her fingers squeezed painfully. Natasha jerked away, but Tyra didn't let go. "Chanel is talking to you nicely, and you're being stubborn," she said in a low voice. "Don't be clever. Agree, and you'll be happy." "Let me go!" Natasha tried to break free, but the grip was iron. Chanel gave a sign, and Tyra loosened her grip. Natasha recoiled, rubbing her shoulder. Chanel looked at her calmly, but there was something cold and merciless in her eyes. "Think carefully. You have a couple of days. But know this, refusal is also an answer, and the consequences will be appropriate." They left, leaving Natasha trembling in the middle of the courtyard. Rita approached and silently took her by the arm, leading her to the far wall. "I told you that refusing would only anger her," Rita said quietly when they were at a safe distance. "Now Chanel will press even harder. She's not used to being told no. What am I supposed to do?" Natasha felt her legs buckling. I just can't agree to this." Rita was silent for a long time, staring at the gray sky above the prison walls. "I don't know, baby. I honestly don't know. There are no good options here. Only bad ones and very bad ones." The next 2 days were a nightmare. Natasha felt like she was being watched constantly. Wherever she went, Chanel's people were there. In the dining room, in the laundry room, in the shower room. They didn't do anything overt. They just watched. They were just there. A constant reminder that she was on the hook, that her time was running out. On the 3rd day after the conversation in the courtyard, the woman with the tattoo on her neck approached Natasha again. The same one who had delivered the message in the laundry room. "Chanel is waiting for you. Cell number 27. Now. Don't keep her waiting." This time Natasha went. She understood that she could no longer put it off. Cell 27 was at the other end of the corridor. Natasha walked there as if to her execution. The door was ajar. She knocked and entered. Chanel's cell was different from the others. It was cleaner and more comfortable. There were photographs on the walls and a real bedspread on the bunk, not a prison blanket. There was a small TV in the corner. The privileges of power. Chanel was sitting at the table. A deck of cards lay in front of her. Tyra stood by the door, blocking the exit. Two other assistants sat on the bed. "Come in, close the door," said Chanel. "We need to talk." Natasha closed the door and remained standing in the doorway. Chanel shuffled the cards without looking at her. "So, here's the thing. I've thought about your situation. You're stubborn. I get that. You don't like being told what to do. I respect that. So I've decided to give you a chance. A fair chance." She looked up at Natasha. "Let's play cards. If you win, I'll leave you alone, completely. I'll back off, call off my people. You'll be as free as you can be within these walls. But if you lose, you'll be mine, completely, unconditionally. We'll play for your prison virginity. Do you agree?" Natasha stood silently, processing the information. Cards. Chanel was offering to play cards. And suddenly, an image of her father popped into her head. Her father, who had taught her to play when she was 12. Her father, who was an avid gambler, lost his salary, but knew all the intricacies of card games. He taught her to play fool, showed her how to memorize cards, how to calculate probabilities. She played well, very well. "What are we playing?" Natasha asked, and for the first time in days, her voice sounded confident. Chanel smiled. "Fool, my favorite game. We play until the deck is finished. Whoever is left with cards in their hands loses. Everything is fair. Everything is by the rules." Natasha approached the table and sat down opposite Chanel. Tyra and the others watched silently. Chanel shuffled the deck with professional movements. Then she laid it out on the table and offered to cut. Natasha cut. Chanel dealt the cards, put down the deck, and turned over the trump card. Hearts. The trump card was the 10 of hearts. The game began. The first few moves went smoothly. Natasha concentrated completely, remembering everything her father had taught her. She counted the cards, memorized what had already been played, and calculated her moves. Chanel played calmly and confidently, too confidently. On the fifth move, Natasha noticed something strange. Chanel threw her a 7 of spades, although Natasha was sure that this card had already been played before. She tensed up and began to watch more closely, and she saw Chanel's movements were too smooth, too practiced. She knew what she was taking from the deck. She was controlling which cards Natasha received. Cheating. Classic professional cheating. Natasha wanted to scream, to stop the game, but she realized it was pointless. She was alone against 4. Tyra and the others would not let her leave. There was no referee, no rules, only Chanel's will. The game continued. Natasha tried to fight, but she had no chance. Chanel played masterfully, taking the cards she wanted and giving Natasha unfavorable moves. The deck was dwindling. Natasha felt her hope slipping away with each card. The last move. There was only one card left in the deck on the table. Chanel had nothing in her hands. Natasha had 3 cards. She lost. Chanel leaned back in her chair and smiled broadly, triumphantly. "Looks like luck isn't on your side, sweetheart. The game is over." Natasha sat motionless, staring at the cards in her hands. 3 cards that decided her fate. She wanted to scream that it was unfair, that Chanel had cheated, but her voice wouldn't obey her. You cheated," she finally managed to say. Chanel shrugged. "Prove it. Who will believe you? You lost, baby. You lost fair and square. Everyone saw it." Tyra and the others nodded. Yes, everyone saw it. Everyone was a witness to the fair game. Chanel got up from the table, walked over to Natasha, and put her hand on her shoulder. Natasha flinched at the touch. "Don't be so afraid," Chanel said almost affectionately. "I'm not a monster. You'll be with me, and you'll be fine. I promise. Come here tomorrow evening after dinner. Get ready. We'll spend some time together, and you'll see that it's not as scary as you think." Natasha stood up, staggering. Her legs wouldn't hold her. Tyra opened the door and let her out into the corridor. Natasha walked, unable to see the road ahead. Tears blurred her vision. She reached her cell on autopilot and pushed the door open. Rita was sitting on her bunk. She looked at Natasha and understood everything without words. Natasha collapsed onto the lower bunk and burst into tears. She cried for a long time, desperately, like a child. Rita said nothing, just sat next to her. Sometimes she stroked her back. But there was no consolation. There couldn't be. When the tears stopped, Natasha looked up at Rita with red, swollen eyes. "What am I going to do now?" Rita was silent for a long time. Then she took something wrapped in a rag from under the mattress. She unwrapped it. In her hand was a sharpened blade, a homemade knife made from a piece of metal, sharpened to a razor's edge, with a handle wrapped in cloth. "The only way to stop them is to fight back," Rita said quietly. "If you don't stop them now, they'll break you. You'll become a thing they use. But if you show them that you won't give up without a fight, that you're ready to go all the way, maybe you'll have a chance." She held out the knife to Natasha. Natasha looked at the weapon, hesitating to take it. I can't. I've never hit anyone, let alone killed someone." "You can if you have to choose between your life and someone else's," Rita said harshly. "There's no room for doubt here. There's only action. Take care of yourself, baby, because no one else here will protect you." Natasha took the knife with trembling hands. The metal was cold, unfamiliar. She hid it under the mattress and lay down on the bunk, curling up into a ball. Tomorrow evening, tomorrow after dinner. She was supposed to come to Chanel, and then... Natasha didn't know what would happen then. But the knife lay under the mattress, cold and sharp. Her last hope. Her last chance. The night dragged on endlessly. Natasha lay on her bunk, staring at the dark ceiling, unable to close her eyes. Every time she closed them, Chanel's face appeared before her. Her smile. Her cold, confident eyes. Tomorrow evening, after dinner. These words spun around in her head like a broken record. Rita tossed and turned on the lower bunk. She wasn't sleeping either. At about 3 in the morning, she asked quietly, "Are you awake?" "Yes," whispered Natasha. A long pause. Then Rita said, "Listen to me carefully. What I gave you is not a toy. It's a weapon. If you decide to use it, you must be prepared to go all the way. Do you understand? There will be no warning shots. There will be no opportunity to stop halfway. It's either you or them. There is no choice." "But if I use it," Natasha couldn't say the word out loud. "Then they'll add to your sentence," Rita said simply. "They could give you another 10, 15, 20 years. They could even give you life. It depends on how they classify it. But at least you'll remain yourself. At least you'll keep what's inside you." Natasha turned on her side and pressed her fist to her mouth to keep from screaming. The choice between years in prison and losing herself. Some kind of terrible, unthinkable choice that no ordinary accountant from a quiet suburb should ever have to face. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. "No one knows until they're in that situation," Rita replied. "But the survival instinct is stronger than you think. When the moment comes, your body will decide for you." The rest of the night passed in a heavy semi-consciousness. Natasha would fall into a restless sleep, then jump up at the slightest noise. The morning was gray and rainy. The sky cried outside the small window under the ceiling. The day dragged on painfully slowly. Breakfast passed in a fog. Natasha couldn't taste her food and mechanically chewed the tasteless porridge. The work in the laundry room lasted forever. Her hands folded the laundry, loaded the machines, and hung up the washed clothes. But her brain was occupied with one thought. Evening was approaching. With every minute, with every second. The sharpened blade lay in the pocket of her prison pants, wrapped in a rag. Natasha constantly checked to see if it was still there. She touched her pocket and felt the hardness of the metal. It was both reassuring and frightening. She tried to imagine how it would be, how she would take out the knife, where she would strike. Would she be able to bring herself to hurt someone? She had never fought before. She avoided conflict at school. She couldn't even bring herself to kill a mosquito. And now she was going to… what? Hurt someone? Kill them? Was she really capable of that? Lunch. Natasha saw Chanel at the next table. She looked at her and smiled, slowly, promisingly. Tyra was laughing at some joke nearby. Both were calm and relaxed. For them, it was a normal day. For Natasha, it was the last day before the end of the world. After lunch, there was a short walk. The rain had stopped, but the yard was wet and the air was damp. Natasha walked around the perimeter, Rita walking silently beside her. There was no need for words. Everything had already been said the night before. Then it was back to work. Then dinner. Natasha couldn't eat. The food stuck in her throat. She pushed her plate away. Rita put her hand on her wrist. Eat. You need your strength. Natasha forced herself to eat something. A piece of bread, a few spoonfuls of soup. Her stomach clenched, but she choked it down and swallowed. Dinner was over. The prisoners began to disperse. Natasha got up, wanting to go to her cell, but Tyra blocked her way. She stood with her arms crossed over her chest, looking down at her. Chanel is waiting for you in the shower. Let's go. No question. An order. Natasha looked at Rita. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Natasha followed Tyra. The corridor to the shower room was long and empty. Their footsteps echoed off the walls. Tyra walked ahead, confident and calm. Natasha followed her, her heart pounding wildly. Her hand in her pocket clenched the sharpened blade through the cloth. The sharp edges pricked her palm even through the fabric. The shower room was at the end of the corridor. It was a large, tiled room with rows of shower stalls without doors. Usually it was noisy and crowded, but now the shower room was completely empty. The silence was broken only by the dripping water from one of the faucets. Chanel stood against the far wall, leaning on the tile. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were attentive, studying. When Natasha entered, she smiled. Here you are, right on time. I like punctuality. Tyra closed the door and stood next to Chanel, 2 against 1. Natasha stopped at the entrance, not taking a step forward. Why is no one here? She asked, even though she knew the answer. I made a deal with the guard, Bridgewater, Chanel replied calmly. I gave her some money, and she gave us some time. An hour of complete privacy. No one will bother us. No one will come. So relax. She pushed herself away from the wall and walked slowly toward Natasha, like a predator confident of its prey. You know, I thought you would resist more. But you came. Good for you. That means you understand how things work. You're a smart girl. Natasha took a step back. Chanel continued to approach her. Don't be so afraid. I won't hurt you. On the contrary, I'll be gentle. You'll even enjoy it, I promise. She reached out and touched Natasha's cheek. Natasha recoiled as if from a blow. Chanel frowned. Hey, don't be like that. We had an agreement. You lost, remember? Now you're mine. You cheated, Natasha managed to say. You rigged the cards. Chanel laughed. So what? Prove it. Who cares? You lost, baby. Get over it. Tyra came up behind her, grabbed Natasha's arms and pulled her close. Her strong arms were like iron hoops. Natasha tried to break free, but it was useless. Hold her, Chanel said to Tyra. She doesn't understand yet that resistance is futile. Chanel grabbed the collar of Natasha's shirt and pulled. The buttons flew off, falling with a clatter onto the tiled floor. Natasha screamed, No! Let me go! Don't you dare! Hush, hush, Chanel put her finger on her lips. Don't scream. No one will come anyway. I told you, we're alone. She pulled the shirt down, baring her shoulders. Natasha writhed in Tyra's grip, trying to break free. Panic washed over her in waves. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She had only one instinct, to run, to resist, to not let them. Her right arm was pinned down, but her left was slightly freer. Natasha jerked it free from Tyra's grip and shoved it into her pocket. Her fingers fumbled for the knife. She grabbed it. She pulled it out of the rag. It all happened in a split second. Natasha didn't think. She didn't plan. Her body acted on its own, driven by pure survival instinct. The hand with the knife shot up and plunged into Chanel's throat. Time stood still. Chanel froze with her mouth open, her eyes wide with surprise. She took a step back and grabbed her throat with her hands. Blood gushed between her fingers. A lot of blood. Bright, scarlet, it flowed onto the tile, staining Chanel's white t-shirt red. Tyra screamed. She let go of Natasha and rushed to Chanel. "Chanel! Oh my God, Chanel!" Chanel fell to her knees. Blood poured out. She tried to say something, but instead of words, wheezing and gurgling sounds came out of her throat. Her eyes searched for Natasha, looking confused and fearful. Then she collapsed face down on the wet tile. Tyra turned to Natasha. Her face was contorted with rage. "Bitch! You killed her! I'll kill you!" She lunged at Natasha like a rabid animal. Natasha didn't have time to react. Tyra knocked her off her feet, and they fell together. A heavy body pinned her down. Strong hands grabbed her throat and began to choke her. Natasha couldn't breathe. Fingers dug into her neck, cutting off the air. Black spots floated before her eyes. She struggled under Tyra, trying to throw her off, but she was too heavy, too strong. The knife. Where was the knife? Natasha felt for it on the floor nearby. She grabbed it with her blood-slick hand and struck. Once, twice, 3 times. Randomly, wherever she could. In the side, in the stomach, in the chest. Again and again. Tyra screamed, let go of Natasha's throat, tried to grab her arm with the weapon. But Natasha didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Fear, rage, despair. Everything merged into one mad rush. She struck until Tyra went limp and collapsed to one side. Natasha crawled away and pressed her back against the wall. She was breathing heavily, hoarsely. Her throat hurt from choking. Her hands were shaking. The knife fell from her fingers and clattered on the tile floor. 2 bodies lay on the floor in front of her. Chanel lay motionless in a pool of blood. Tyra was breathing heavily, hoarsely, blood oozing from multiple wounds on her stomach and chest. She looked at Natasha, trying to say something, but only moans escaped her lips. Natasha looked at them and couldn't comprehend that this was real, that she had done this, that there was blood on her hands, a lot of blood, red, sticky, warm. The door to the shower room swung open. Several prisoners rushed inside. Apparently someone had heard the screams. They stopped at the threshold, staring at the scene before them. 2 bloodied bodies on the floor, Natasha against the wall, covered in blood, her eyes vacant. "Oh my God," whispered one of them. "She killed them. She killed Chanel and Tyra." Someone ran to call security. The others stood in the doorway, hesitant to enter. Natasha sat huddled against the wall, staring at her hands. Red. So red. A minute later, the security guards arrived. At the front was the supervisor, Bridgewater. She glanced at the scene in the shower room, and her face turned pale. She grabbed her radio. "Code red in the shower room of Block C. Medical assistance needed. Immediately. And call the police. There's been a double murder." The guards entered cautiously. One approached the bodies and checked Chanel's pulse. He shook his head. He approached Tyra. She was still breathing, but barely. Blood continued to ooze from her wounds. "She's still alive," he shouted. "But not for long if we don't stop the bleeding." Another guard approached Natasha and gently lifted her by the arms. She did not resist. She obediently stood up and allowed herself to be handcuffed. The metal was cold on her wrists. The locks clicked. Bridgewater looked at Natasha with an expression that was difficult to interpret. Not anger, not contempt. Something like understanding or regret. "Take her away," she said quietly. "Isolate her in a single cell until the investigators arrive." Natasha was led down the corridor. She walked like a sleepwalker, seeing nothing around her. Behind her were screams. The sound of footsteps of arriving medics, the voices of prisoners. But she heard nothing. Only the ringing in her ears. Only the beating of her own heart. She was led into a small, solitary confinement cell. Her handcuffs were removed. She was left alone. The door slammed shut. Silence. Natasha sat down on the bed and stared at the wall. Blood was drying on her hands. Someone else's blood. She had killed a person. Maybe two. Chanel was definitely dead. Tyra. She didn't know. She should have felt something. Horror, remorse, shame. But inside there was only emptiness. A strange, cold calm. As if it hadn't happened to her. As if she were watching it all from the outside. An hour passed. Maybe two. Natasha didn't know. Time had lost all meaning. Then the door opened. Bridgewater entered with two people in plain clothes. A man and a woman. Detectives, Natasha realized. The police had arrived. "Natasha Kennard," the man said. "I'm Detective Elliot Kessler, and this is my partner, Violet Durham. We need to talk to you about what happened in the shower tonight." Natasha looked up at him. Kessler was older, with a tired face and gray temples. Durand was younger, with an attentive, penetrating gaze. "Tyra?" Natasha asked hoarsely. "She died on the way to the hospital," Durand replied. "She lost too much blood. 2 deaths. Natasha had killed 2 people." "I want to tell you everything," she said quietly. "I want you to know why this happened. I want you to understand." Kessler nodded and took out a tape recorder. "We're listening, Miss Kennard. Tell us everything from the beginning." And Natasha began to speak. She talked about her first day in prison, about Chanel, about the card game, about the knife from Rita, about how she was cornered, left with no choice, about how she just wanted to survive, just wanted to save herself. The detectives listened in silence. They took notes. Durand nodded from time to time as if she understood. Kessler kept an impassive expression on his face. When Natasha finished, there was silence. Then Durham said quietly, "Do you understand what you're facing? Even if they take the circumstances into account, it's still murder. 2 murders." "I understand," Natasha nodded. "But I'm alive. I'm still myself, and that's what matters." Kessler looked at Bridgewater. "We need to talk to the other inmates, gather testimony. This will be a long investigation." Bridgewater nodded. They left, leaving Natasha alone again. She lay down on her bunk and closed her eyes. There were years ahead of her. Many years. Maybe decades. But she had survived. She had fought back. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the layer of shock and emptiness, there was a tiny spark. Pride. She hadn't broken. They hadn't broken her.